hope he does.
Folks, I didn't realize that I was going to be speaking here tonight.
Well, I guess the dad burned nervous.
I think it stems from the fact that I'm not going to get on that stage. I had an uncle one time standing out on a stage like that right up there, and he slipped, and he fell down through a hole in the middle of the stage. We don't believe he'd have broke both of his legs if it hadn't been for that rope around his neck.
You see Buddy rope around his neck. That's the punchline right there.
Nice fella, he's just a little slow on the uptake. I'll tell you, I'm really happy to be here with y'all tonight. I'm so glad to be here tonight. I got some bad news from over in Mayberry last week. A buddy of mine worked over there at the paint factory in Mayberry, and they sent me a letter, and they said my buddy was over there working at the paint factory, and he was over there climbing up this ladder, and he got to the top rung of the ladder, and somehow he slipped, and he fell head first off that ladder down into a big old vat full of varnish, and he couldn't swim. And he drowned in that varnish. And the letter they sent me said that it was a terrible death, but it was a beautiful finish.
Did you get that all right, buddy? Stand up, buddy. Stand up. Yes, okay.
Don't it do your heart good to see Ernest T. Bass here tonight? Good, Ernest T. Proud of that boy. Now, folks, normally when I speak out in front of a big crowd, go ahead, honey. Nice to see Aunt B so active. Normally when I speak out in front of a big crowd like this, somebody will usually ask me how I got into the lawman gang.
How did you?
I appreciate that. Well, it goes like this, see. Me and Thelma Lou. We were sitting over to Snappy Lunch, eating a pork chop sandwich. She says to me, she says, Barney, she said, why don't you go over and talk to Andy and see if he'll let you be his deputy?
I says, all right.
So I went over there and I says, how about me being your deputy? He says, Barney, that'd be fine. He says, but first, you got to pass a little test. I says, Andy, what kind of a test is it? He says, oh, it's simple. He says, it's only got one question. I says, what's that? He says, the question is, who shot Abraham Lincoln? Well, I says, Andy, could I have overnight to think about it? He said, yeah, I'm going home and think about it. So that next night, being family, we're sitting back over there at the Snappy Lunch eating another pork chop sandwich. And she says to me, she says, Barney, did you get that job as a deputy?
And I says, yeah, I think so. Andy's already got me working on a murder case. Stand up, everybody. I tell you, this room is full of them, ain't it? Ain't it wonderful to see Opie all grown up? Yeah, I'm so proud of that boy. You know, when Opie was a little teeny fella now, when Opie was a little teeny fella, he's what everybody would have called a precocious.
You know what precocious means, honey? Well, you want to think about it or what? It means that Opie was a smart little boy, right? And I think we would all agree that Opie was a smart little boy, and he was. But you know what? Even them smart boys, they can get in trouble, and you police officers know that more than anybody else. Yeah, you've been in trouble, I ain't. Well, little Opie was no exception. I'm going to give you an example. He was sitting in church one Sunday morning, little Opie was. Sitting in church, and old Andy had given him $1 to put out there in the offering plate during the church service. Little Opie had that dollar bill balled up in his hand. And about halfway through the church service, here come that offering plate right through the pew. Little Opie took it and he passed it right over to Aunt B. Wave at him again, Aunt B. Wave. That's right. He handed her that offering plate, and off it went, and he still had that dollar bill balled up in his hand. And when the church service was over, little Opie fished his way through the crowd there till he found our preacher standing there, Reverend Tucker. And he took old Reverend Tucker's hand and laid that crumpled up dollar bill out in it.
Old Reverend Tucker looked at it. He says, well, Opie.
That's the way he talked.
He said, well, Opie. He said, you know, I appreciate that. He said, now tell me something. Didn't that offering plate come through your pew? About halfway through the church service?
Like that? Little Opie looked up at me and says, yeah, preacher, it did. He says, but I wanted to put that dollar bill right in your hand because my pa says you're the poorest preacher we ever had. That's precocious, ain't it? Folks, I'll tell you the truth. I'm so glad to be here with you all tonight to bring a little bit of Mayberry down here in this town. I'm so glad to be here. Mayberry is one of the most wonderful towns in the world. And they're all over the place, really. Carrollton's kind of like Mayberry a little bit. And I'm so proud to be here. I just thought I'd bring you up to date on some of the goings-on in Mayberry. How many of y'all remember, come here, buddy. Come here. You look so damn burning good, I'll tell you. Can you do a Cary Grant impression? Y'all remember Goober Pyle, don't you? You remember Goober? Let me hear that Cary Grant impression.
Well, I just don't know what to say to you, Barney.
Well, I want you to say, Judy, Judy, Judy.
Judy, Judy, Judy.
Whoa, that is good, man. He kind of favors Goober a little bit. Bless his heart. You close your eyes, you'd have thought Cary Grant was standing right there. But the reason I bring Goober up to you, Mayberry is a little town. But it has a tendency to grow like other little towns across the country, you know. And we're no exception up there. And an example of that is Goober was sitting over at that same snappy lunch the other day. He said he was sitting there eating one of them big pork chop sandwiches. And he said he looked across the aisle over there and said this man and this woman was sitting over there in a booth. And they was both eating a pork chop sandwich. And Goober said he got to staring at them right hard. And he said all of a sudden, that man over in the booth slid right out of his seat right down in the floor. Well, Juanita, the waitress over there, y'all remember her? She come running over there. And she tapped that woman on the shoulder like that. Says to her, says, ma'am, she says, your husband just slid down in the floor. Like that. And said that woman looked up at her and said, my husband just come through the front door. Oh, you got that one, didn't you, buddy? You got that one. Mayberry's just chock full of the most wonderful people in the world. I'll tell you what. Oh, no, you got too much going on up there, son. I need somebody that's a little bit worse off than you. I'll find him, dog. Yeah, you got a little wave, a little comb over there too. Oh, I'll tell you, I need somebody. You'll do. You will do. You will do. Will you stand up? Can you? Good grief! I didn't realize that, buddy. I hope you're gentle in nature. Just turn right around there. Don't sit down. I hope this will hold me. Yeah. Just turn. Will you turn around? Right there is what I'm looking for, buddy. I'm telling you, that is the widest part I have ever seen in my life. They said he used to use Head and Shoulders, now he uses mopping gloves. Any of y'all remember a feller in Mayberry by the name of, woo-hoo! You're not around here, are you? Any of y'all remember a feller up in Mayberry by the name of Mr. Swamp? Any of y'all remember Mr. Swamp? Now, he lived up there, and he had to wear one of them there, toupee. Sorry, buddy. Sorry. Them feet are rough. I didn't spit on you there. Quit leaning on me. He's just like an old bulldog. But anyway, Mr. Swamp, he had to wear one of them there toupees, and he lost his toupee. And he had to order one. I'm not messing anything up there, buddy. He had to order one out of this here catalog. Well, it come in about 2 weeks. And Mr. Swamp, he was so excited about that thing. It arrived in this box with brown paper all around it, and he tore that brown paper off that box, and he looked at the top of it. It said 100% cat hair toupee. Well, he took the lid off that box, and he took that cat hair toupee out of there, and he laid it right down there on his head. You kind of like that, don't you, buddy? I think he was starting to purr. That old cat hair toupee looks so pretty just laying up there. But he had one little problem with it. Every time somebody rubbed his head, he'd arch his back. Would y'all give this good man a round of applause? Of course, that is not Mr. Swamp. That ain't Mr. Swamp, but I had to use somebody, and he fit the bill. I'll tell you what, folks, Mr. Swamp, you know every town has got very important people in it, don't it? It does. Mr. Swamp was very important up in Mayberry. He held a very high distinction in our little town. Mr. Swamp was the oldest living resident of Mayberry, North Carolina. He was 114 years old up to last week. That's right. Last week in his sleep, real peaceful like. Just like it's going to happen to each and every one of us someday. Poor old Mr. Swamp. He passed away. Well, they fixed him up. You know, like they'll do, they fixed him up. And they laid him out in this box. And they got 6 of them boys up there in Mayberry that was willing to carry him way up the hill there at the end of Main Street to the cemetery. Them boys got that box with Mr. Swamp in it up on their shoulders. And up that steep hill they went. Oh, buddy, I forgot to mention something. It had rained right hard the night before that. And that red dirt up there in the cemetery, it got right wet. Well, the boy on the front of the box that had Mr. Swamp in it, his right foot hit that slick mud. Whoa! And down that boy went. And when he fell, the other 5 boys lost their balance. And they dropped what they had. Now, when that box with Mr. Swamp in it hit that steep hill, It just took off like a shot. When it hit Main Street, it was doing 35 miles an hour. It went all the way down the middle of Main Street there and it hit the curb right there in front of the drugstore, jumped the curb, hit the double doors at the drugstore, and went right on in. Went all the way back through the middle of the drugstore. And when it got to the counter in the back there, Miss Ellie, that lady druggist, she come running out of the back room. Well, at about the same time, the lid of that box flew open, and Mr. Swamp sat straight up. Miss Ellie says to him, she says, "Can I help you?" He said, "Yeah, you got anything to stop this coughing?" Come on. Come on. I tell you, I am so thrilled to be here tonight. Floyd's here somewhere. Where's Floyd? There he is. Stand up, Floyd. Y'all remember Floyd the barber, don't you? Don't Floyd look good? I'm proud to see you, Floyd. Now, y'all remember Floyd. He's probably one of my favorite people in Mayberry. And we all have our own set of problems, don't we? Every one of us do. And I think Floyd's biggest problem was Floyd just didn't talk like the rest of us. He had something going on in his voice, didn't he? He had, ooh. He'd do that a bunch, but ooh. He'd do it a bunch. Well, you know, I hadn't seen Floyd in a while. And I went over to the barber shop last week. And I walked in and I says, "Hey, Floyd, how are you?" No, Floyd says, "Ooh." He said, "Say," he said, "I haven't been feeling too well." Like that. And I said, "Oh my goodness, Floyd." I said, "What is the problem?" "Oh." He said, "Hey, I've had a terrible cough for 2 weeks." I said, "That is bad." I said, "What have you done for it?" He said, "Well, I went over to see Miss Ellie at the drugstore. She gave me a laxative." I said, "Did it help?" He said, "I don't know. I'm afraid to cough." I've been there. You've been there, buddy. I've been there. I did. I loved old Floyd so much. Floyd was about my favorite person in Mayberry. He heard about some barber over in Charlotte, North Carolina, was advertising the closest shave in America. No, Floyd said, "Ooh." He said, "I got to see that." So he got in his old pickup truck and he drove down to Charlotte, North Carolina, and he drove around until he found that little barber shop. And sure enough, there in the window it said, "Closest shave in America." Old Floyd parked his pickup truck and got out and went inside. The barber says, "Come on in, friend." And Floyd said, Yeah, I'm Floyd Lawson from Mayberry." And that barber says, "You're Floyd Lawson?" He says, "Man, you are famous." He said, "I bet you come down here about that close shave, didn't you?" And old Floyd says, Yeah, close shave." Barber says, "You're so famous," he says, "I'm going to give you one for free." He said, "Sit on down here in the chair." And Floyd sat down in that barber chair, and that barber went over and got him one of them sheets with stripes on it, and brought it over there and wrapped it around old Floyd's neck. Then he went over and the little black box over, he turned the dial on it, and this white foam came out. And he come over there and scrubbed that around on old Floyd's face. Then he got a leather strop up that's hanging on that chair, and he got a straight razor. Man, he sharpened that straight razor on there. He looked at it. Yeah, it's sharp enough. He says, "Now, Floyd," he says, "we have a process on this close shave." And he went over to the wall over there, and this little shelf over there, and he took this little ceramic ball off the shelf. He come over there, and he says, "Now, Floyd," he says, "in order to get this close shaved," he said, "I'm going to ask you to put this ceramic ball right in your mouth and shove it over there in your jaw." He said, "That'll make that skin protrude out there." He said, "When I come down over it with this straight razor," he said, "you're going to see." It's the closest shave you ever had in your life. And old Floyd put that ball in his mouth and shoved it over in his jaw. And here come that barber with that straight razor, and he come down over that hump, and right over down, right across his neck, and old Floyd reached up and, oh, is it say, that's smooth. Barber says, your dad burned right, it's smooth. He says, put that ball on the other side, and he said, I'll shave the other side. And old Floyd started to move that ball over there with his tongue, and he swallowed it. He swallowed the ball. And he said, hey. He said, I think I swallowed the ball. Barber said, you swallowed the ball? He said, yes, I swallowed the ball. And the barber thought about it. He said, what? He said, well, don't worry about it, Floyd. He said, just bring it back in a couple of days. That's what everybody else does. That could happen in Mayberry. But Floyd was wonderful. We had a lot of wonderful people in Mayberry. A lot of wonderful people. You know, I mentioned Reverend Tucker there a little while ago when I was talking about Opie. Reverend Tucker was a fine man. Lived there in Mayberry, and he brought a lot of people to the Lord. Decent soul. Any of y'all a deacon in the church? Any of y'all? One. And you was bidding there. You was gambling there a minute ago. Well, Reverend Tucker made an announcement a few Sundays ago. Church needs a copier, he said. He said, we've secured one in Winston-Salem. He says, and I need somebody to take me down to Winston-Salem to pick up that copier. So one of our deacons come up to him and says, I'll take you. He said, I can take you on Wednesday. So on Wednesday morning, here comes my deacon and picked old Reverend Tucker up, and they headed down Route 52 out of Mayberry toward Winston-Salem. And they got about a minute pilot down there, and that deacon slowed his car down. And he kind of leaned over to Reverend Tucker. He says, preacher, he says, look here. He says, I'm a deacon and everything. He says, but in my private life, he says, I am a traveling salesman. And he says, when I go out of town on sales calls, he says, normally if I stop at lunch to get me a sandwich or something, he says, I'll normally have me a highball.
Reverend Tucker says, well, young man, he says, I'll not be having no highball with you.
Like that. So they go on down to Winston-Salem and they pick up that copier and put it in the trunk. And then they go to get a sandwich. It's about lunchtime, so they go get a sandwich. And sure enough, they sit down. And that deacon tells that boy he wants a highball. And the waiter writes it down. Reverend Tucker looks at him. He says, young man, he says, you bring me an iced tea. Sweet. Like that. The waiter wrote it down and went off to get it. Well, that deacon almost leaned all the way across the table. He says, look here, preacher. He says, ain't nobody down here in Winston-Salem knows you. He said, ain't you never thought about having a little drinky? Like that?
Reverend Tucker says, why, young man, he says, you know, I have heard of a drink that they say is mighty tasty. He said, I believe they call it a martini. He said, I might have one of them.
So sure enough, here come that waiter with the iced tea, and Reverend Tucker says, put that iced tea right here on the table. He says, now look here. He says, I've heard of a drink that you people serve in places like this. They say it's mighty tasty. He said, I believe they call it a martini, and I believe I'll have one. So the waiter wrote it down, and he went off to the bartender over there to get it. And when he got over there, he's laughing right out loud, and the bartender says, what is so funny? And that waiter says, well, you ain't gonna believe it. He says, right over there at that table over there, he said, there's a man just ordered a martini. That bartender says, is Reverend Tucker in here again? What a joy Mayberry is. But what a life to live celebrating Mayberry almost every day of my life. My name is David Browning, and I began doing the Mayberry Deputy in 1989. I got a call from a friend of mine
He had the Darling boys, y'all that watch the show. Most of y'all watch the Andy Griffith Show. Remember the Darling family from up in the hills? Yeah, bluegrass. They created their own style of bluegrass. Matter of fact, I was thinking of Briscoe Darling, their daddy. I just loved him. I never got to meet him. But they said he was out plowing his ground one day up there in the hills, and they'd grow some corn every now and then, you know, and then they'd liquefy it. They said old Briscoe was out there plowing up his ground. He said one of them, you know how people come off them mountainsides on them hang glider things? So one of them multicolored hang gliders come sailing over his property. He said old Briscoe just dropped the plow where he was and turned around and run into the cabin and come out with a shotgun. He said he raised it up there and just blowed that thing right out of the sky. And said Charlene, his girl, was in the cabin, and she come running out saying, Paul, what's going on around here? They said old Briscoe looked back up there and said, Charlene, I don't know what that thing was, but I made it let that feller go. But I love the Darlings. So in 1989, a bluegrass promoter called me and said, I got the Darling boys coming to do a concert. He said, I think if you got a khaki uniform, because I had sort of a reputation for emceeing things and that kind of thing here in Bristol, where we live, Bristol, Virginia. And I said, okay, and I went on the hunt, found a costume. And I went to MC a show for the Darlings. And I thought it would be one and done. And that was in 1989. And here we are, 31 years later. And for 20 years, I averaged about 185 bookings a year. It's a remarkable thing, and I tell you that because I want to share something with you, just if I may. It's a remarkable story, in my opinion, because it happened to me. I had struggled. I was a local guy working in the community theater, supporting my community in that way, earning a living. We were a young married couple. This is my wife, Patty, and we had a child. We had 3 children by this time, still struggling, and I had seen the ups and the downs of working in a small community doing creative arts kind of things. Never dreamed I would go beyond that. Wanted to, but had no idea that I would. And in 1989, my life changed drastically. Because soon after that first night, I took a new job directing the State Outdoor Drama of Virginia. It's a story called The Trail of the Lonesome Pine. Famous old story. It came out the same year that The Wizard of Oz came out. It was the first Technicolor movie to be made with Fred McMurray. It's called Trail of the Lonesome Pine. And it's very historic there in Southwest Virginia about the discovery of coal and mining and that kind of thing. And they hired me to be their executive director. And they had a very poor attendance because they were way off the beaten path. There wasn't an interstate close to them. And the first year I was there, I thought, creative thought, maybe I could put that deputy uniform back on and go to some civic clubs and go to churches and promote the drama, do a little bit of humor, and then promote the drama and see if I couldn't increase my attendance. I increased the attendance one year, the second year over the first year I was there, by 130%. And it really said something to me. Mayberry speaks to people. It really does speak to people. I was amazed by it. And that was about 1991. I got a call that year from Nashville, Tennessee. A fellow who had created the Andy Griffith Show Rerun Watcher Clubs, Jim Clark. He said, we've got a Mayberry event going on at Opryland. You remember they had a theme park. That was still open then. There was no mall there. And he said, we want you to come and be a part of the atmosphere. He said, we got about 20 of the stars from the Andy Griffith Show coming, including Don Knotts, who played Barney. I said, well, you don't need me to come. You got the real McCoy. He said, but Don doesn't do Barney. Don does Don. He said, we want you to be a part of the atmosphere. So I drove down in my Ford Tempo that had over 400,000 miles on it, and the right headlight shot up this direction. It was perfect for driving over the mountains of Southwest Virginia. But I drove to Nashville. They wouldn't let me stay at the Opryland Hotel. I stayed at the Ramada across the street. But I put my uniform on that morning, and I walked over to the Geo Theater, and here was Don Knotts, and Thelma Lou, the real ones, and Ernest T., and Goober, and Rafe Hollister, and all four of the Darwin boys, and Charlene, and Miss Ellie, the lady druggist. And I'm just standing there. I watched it ever since I was a kid. And I'm looking at these people, and they look great. And I thought, what in the world am I doing here? Because they were having a great time with each other. They knew each other. But I went out and did my job. I was out in the crowd mingling like I did here with you all tonight. And on the second day, it was a 2-day event. On the second day, Don Knotts' wife came up to me. Her name was Francie. She came up to me, and these were her words. He wants to see you. And my first thought was, well, this has been fun. I really did. I thought, this has been fun. He's getting ready to tell me that I'm way out of line. I walked into Don Knotts' dressing room. He came out. He's a little guy. He sat down on the sofa. He said, come on, sit down. And I went over and sat down next to him. And he said, man, you are doing a great job out there. I said, well, thank you very much. We had a very pleasant conversation, and during the conversation, he said, listen, I've got an idea. He said, the next time I come east, he said, I need your information because I think I'd like for you to be my opening act. And I was just gaga. I just didn't know whether I should do that or not. Because this guy has got comedic genius, you know? So I came home and told my wife, the voice of reality. I said, Don Knotts has asked me to be his opening act. And my wife didn't bat an eye. She said, well, you know how those Hollywood people are. He probably didn't mean it. So about 2 years later, we get a call from his agent. He said, what the devil happened to you? So I just didn't know if it was real or not. He said, it sure was real. And he said, Don's coming to East Tennessee. He wants you to open for him. And I opened for him, and we did, for the next 11 years, every time he came east, I was his opening act. And what a miracle in my life. And I tell you that because when you do something like this, and you get to work with law enforcement, you get to work with churches, and you get to work with civic groups who do so much good in communities, it turns it back on you, and it causes you to ask, what was the purpose in all of this? Why did God choose me to even have a moment with Don Knotts or to say hello, much less be his opening act? And I know what it was. I had paid those dues back doing the community theater. I'd had the ups and I'd had the downs, and I'd proven that I would go ahead and do these things regardless. And so God said, here's the gift. See what you can do with it. Isn't that something? So, when I say it turns back on you, I've asked myself year after year after year, why am I the one that got to do this? And I sat down one night, and in about 10 minutes, the whole answer came to me. And this really applies to why we are all here tonight. This community, this police department, this FOP are serving so many people, and you, through them, are serving so many people. You're here tonight. You're serving. Just like a police officer on the beat or on patrol. You are serving by being here tonight. I've spoken at more Citizens Police Academy graduations than you can imagine. There are more community people who support their law enforcement than you can ever imagine. They just don't get any press. I asked a police officer one time, I said, what is the deal with so much in the media? And they said, well, most of them call me Barney. Well, Barney, you get to see and work with the 97% of the population who are really great people. And out in the community, we have to deal with that 3% to get all the press. And it's the truth. So here is my message. I love doing the silly stories. I love talking about Mayberry and the characters. I got to work with most of them. But that night, in 10 minutes, the answer came to me. And I would love to share it with you tonight if I may. The answer was this, and I wrote it down. The man upstairs, all God ever wanted me to do, all he ever wanted me to do was be a good deputy. And it has nothing to do with the uniform. He wanted me to be a good deputy. One who listens to what the chief has to say and follows the rules.